In this talk, I'll be speaking about climate change and the future of plant production in Southern Africa. I'm going to take a specific focus on forests. So I'll start off by talking about climate change and some of the work that we've done around expectations for Southern Africa. And then I'll finish off by talking specifically about forests and the notion of a new normal, including research gaps and questions that really remain. So if we look at the IPCC special report on 1.5 degrees centigrade, we see two key findings that I'm going to touch on here, amongst others, that we can say with high confidence. Firstly, that if we look at the road behind us, human activities are estimated to have caused approximately 1 degree centigrade of global warming above pre-industrial levels, with a range there depending on the representative concentration pathway you choose. Global warming is likely to reach 1.5 degrees centigrade between 2030 and 2052, with a continued increase at the current rate, and that's again a finding with high confidence. Secondly, and importantly for all sectors, including forestry, warming will persist for centuries to millennia, so it'll cause further long-term changes in the climate system. And again, that's a finding with high confidence. So how has climate in Southern Africa changed so far? So my source here is the SADC Climate Change Handbook 2nd edition, which was published in 2017. We're updating some of that work now. So if we look at the Climate Research Unit temperature version for the land surface temperature dataset, we see that there's strong evidence, you can see in figure 1.2 to the right, that average land surface temperature has increased over the last century. So associated with these increases are increases in evapotranspiration, for example, and that, amongst other things, has important implications for water stress and for the key sectors agriculture and forestry. Now, if we look at the big picture in terms of projecting climate change for Southern Africa, we've made significant progress in projecting and understanding climate change for the region. And this is important because, of course, climate change is not simply an academic exercise. It also provides us with an increasingly robust basis for strategy and policy, not just in the member states for the SADC region, but also within the sub-region itself. So if we look at some of the key messages drawn from recent subsets of future climate projections, we look at areas where they agree. So if we look here at the summary of climate projections for the region published then, we see for temperature, if we look across general circulation models, statistical downscalings and dynamical downscalings, which are the two key areas of methodology for downscaling for regional climate projections, we see robust findings in terms of increases in mean, maximum and minimum temperature for the region. In terms of rainfall, we see some agreement in terms of increases in rainfall over Tanzania and parts of northern Mozambique, and decreases over central southern Africa, northern Botswana, Namibia, southern Zambia, Zimbabwe, and importantly the southwestern Cape of South Africa. And when we look at extreme temperatures, not for statistical downscalings, but if we look at GCMs and dynamical downscalings, we see this very robust finding in terms of increases in very hot days and heat waves. Now, what are we seeing when we look specifically at forests? So we know, obviously, there's some variation, but largely, if we look at the planet, forest cover has declined in the past half century, despite an increase in plantation forestry. And the source here is from an article that we published in Frontiers last year, focusing on forests and water across the planet, but also looking at specific regions. Now, we know already that natural and human disturbances affect forest components. And these, of course, in turn affect hydrological processes. So, for example, interception, evapotranspiration, infiltration, soil moisture storage, and percolation. A number of these changes come from several very influential natural disturbance processes, so processes that are occurring naturally affecting forests, including insects and pathogens, wildfire, ice storms, wind throw, and of course none of this is separate from human disturbances. Human disturbances include the establishment and the harvest of forests, plantations, the establishment of agroforestry areas, and importantly, something that we often overlook, the presence of urban and peri-urban forests. Now, if we look at these natural disturbances, what are the implications in terms of climate change? Well, climate change, and it's important if we look at the findings of those climate change projections for Southern Africa, will directly alter, amongst other things, forest hydrological processes. Will have significant implications, and we are already seeing some changes in this so far. And secondly, we can't separate climate change from social and economic factors. So social and economic factors are already directly altering forest management through things like intensive plantations, deforestation, forest degradation, selective logging, the significant loss of riparian forest in certain areas and the loss of urban trees, and importantly, changes in disturbance regimes. So we have disturbance regimes that we already expect for forests, but the changes in disturbance regimes is where we're particularly interested and particularly concerned. And many people now talk about a new normal in terms of COVID-19, but in forests we've talked a great deal about the notion of a new normal. If we see these changes in disturbance regimes, what will a new normal in forests look like, and how can we best do our science in terms of managing for that? So just some concluding thoughts. Future climate and social changes, again, we can't separate them, are already and will alter forests, including plantation forests. So we really need continued research and collaboration with forest managers and forest owners, both to improve our resilience to such changes, but also to better realize the multiple benefits of forests. So here are just some ideas around some of the knowledge gaps, and this is not an exhaustive list. What are the characteristics of natural and planted forests, and what are our best forest protection and management strategies that best contribute, for example, to the sustainability of water supplies, given the implications of climate change for the water sector and the hydrological cycle in Southern Africa, long before we look specifically at forests? What are the locations of forested areas within a catchment that are most important if we look at providing water security, not just to ecosystems, but also to downwind and downstream users? Where do we see uncertainty, and how can we quantify it in forest-water relations as a result of the cumulative effects of climate and land use land cover changes? When we look at policy, what are the local, regional, national, and international policy arrangements and instruments that can improve sustainability of the forest sector and the sustainability of water supplies ensured by the forest sector? And finally, how do we best communicate the need, given climate change and this notion of a new normal, to manage forests for downstream and downwind water supplies, and to best realize the multiple benefits from forests, given the changing climate and future social changes? Thank you for having me. I'll be happy to answer questions later.